So I was studying cancer and trying to understand blood vessel formation around cancer because we had this idea way back when that maybe if we starve cancers from their blood and their nutrients, that we would be able to have this great cancer therapeutic.
Yeah.
But it turned out that actually that wasn't a very good line of anti-cancer therapeutics, but it was interesting because we learned a lot about cancer in that one of the things we learned was that tumors actually send off signals that then recruit stem cells to come and help them grow.
Yeah.
So that's where I step in. So I was doing those cancer blood vessel studies and then heard this thing about how stem cells were being recruited. And at the time, and I was at Tulane University in New Orleans, and at the time we had one of the pioneers in the stem cell field right next door, so it was sort of a natural for me to say, hey, can you give me some of your stem cells? I'd like to study about them.
Yeah.
And so he gave me some stem cells, and what came of that was this new technology in trying to understand how do what signals do the tumors send to these stem cells that meant to me that we could actually use some of those signals to trick stem cells into being better therapeutics. Because we were now using stem cells to treat people, and you hear these stories about people putting stem cells into knee joints, or these NFL players that, swear by them and all that, which is good and bad, obviously, because it's not regulated, and God knows, who it's putting what into you. But there is something to the fact that stem cells can help. And primarily what we know now is that they help with resetting the balance of healing in your body. So when we started the stem cell field, we felt like stem cells are going to become the tissue that they're going to fix. But when we started putting them into people, what we found is that they actually don't become those tissue cells. What they actually do is tamp down the inflammatory response such that the tissue can now heal itself. Because what happened in evolution is we were able to live without a digit, but we can't live with a bacterial infection. So inflammation is just nothing more than trying to protect ourselves from an invading bacteria. And because of that, when we have a wound or an injury, we overshoot the inflammation, and that prevents us from being able to heal. So a lot of human diseases are really just that the balance is not there, and so putting stem cells in, we actually reset that balance to the healing notch, and so now we can get your tissues to heal. So the technology I discovered, long story here, was all about making the stem cells, using these signals, tricking them into being better at healing and better at product. And so I felt like that was an amazing technology. And so I bravely set with my university to file for new intellectual property. That led me to start a company, to file for federal funding from NIH, which I was fortunate enough to get.
Amazing.
And it was a collaboration with somebody here at UCSD.
Okay.
So when I got the funds, part of the requirement was that I no longer could be a full-time professor. So I now had to give up my academic thing, and I jumped at it.
I was going to say, how did that feel? Were you're like, okay, I'm out of here.
So it was, pretty cavalier of me and sort of naive to just jump into starting up a company.
How old-ish were you at this time?
Mid-40s.
Okay.
So pretty mature, having spent about 20 years or so in the lab. Yes, in academia. And I guess facing the reality that federal funding for technology, for life science and health was going down, and it was getting harder and harder to get grants in my academic lab. It was easier at the time to get business grants, so I was able to get that. And so 6 years ago, moved the whole family and come to San Diego, where I was probably one of the first companies in the J Labs, which is the Johnson & Johnson Innovation Center. So they had a great model where they brought in startups, because they had this big building that had all the lab fixings in it. And the good thing about that was that you would pay a little bit of rent, and in exchange they would know like what new technologies were coming up.
Super smart.
Field. So it was.
Yeah.
It was
it's almost like a co-working space.
It was way, it was just like right on that wave of these co-working spaces.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be such a successful model for them that they've now
replicated it.
Yeah. All over the world.
That's awesome.
And other companies like Massachusetts, MassBio, Biolabs has done the same. So it really became a big thing in the life science startup field. So
amazing.
Yeah.
So you move across the country to San Diego.
Yes,
You're now hanging out at J Labs up on the hill here.
Yes, beautiful site.
Yes.
Great environment.
Yeah.
San Diego has a huge stem cell community, and we're very fortunate that. And one of the things that I loved about moving here was the fact that this community really cares about people. And like when you have a startup and you're starting out, you had things like Connect that for free did a springboard program. J Labs was there, and then you have all the great institutions here for stem cells. So it was a really great place for me to move.
Perfect petri dish of innovation.
Yes, we'd like to think so. We don't get the credit that we deserve in San Diego.
Yeah,
but
Boston gets all the credit.
Boston, Bay Area.
Yeah.
San Diego's like the little stepchild that didn't grow. But.
Yeah. So what was next?
So next was starting to get part of these community help things was getting taught that, as a scientist, you don't have credibility in your business, right?
And as a business person, as a non-scientist, I have such admiration for scientists. I mean, you do amazing things that I could never do.
Right, but investors are looking for somebody mostly that they know, it seems like to me now.
And
a
understandably little. You don't want to throw money at something you have no clue about it.
Right. So obviously venture capital people in particular, they're dealing with somebody else's money, so they want to be safe when they're spending money. So the downside of that is that little people like us that are trying to get into the known world, it's hard to find your way there.
It's hard to make that leap.
Yeah. So I was getting coached that I should bring in somebody with business experience.
Okay. And at this point, you're 100% owner of the business? Okay.
I was
great.
100% owner or co-owner with my partner.
Yep.
And I had this funding from the government. It was pretty significant. I mean, it wasn't huge salary or anything like that, but it was $400,000 for a couple of years to come up with proof of concept of the fact that this stem cell technology was going to be able to do what it could.
Yeah.
But I was getting that pressure of you need to bring in somebody who's a business person. And so what happened was I was investigating a way to get resources because, not having much salary and much personnel, I needed that. So one of the things I was looking at was selling some of my technology cells through a distributor in Maryland. Okay. And this company sold cells to other scientists, and so that meant that you don't need the FDA approval or anything like that. So this was a way that I could be selling a product, right?
Yeah,
make money.
Because it takes so much time to get through FDA approval.
Exactly. So, one of the hard things about being in a startup is it's hard to find ways to make a product and get revenue for that product. So selling stuff. Yeah. So I thought, well, I'll sell cells. So I was talking to a company, and it happened that company was also looking for a CEO at the time. And one of the people that they were interviewing got a hold of my technology and just fell in love with it and said, let me come be your CEO.
Okay.
And how
did that feel? Was it just like, oh my gosh, it's all coming together?
Right. I was like, oh, this guy has all the right background because he was in business and big pharma selling cells. So I'm like, well, this is great, Yeah. And then one of my big life lessons came because as a scientist, you kind of trust that what people tell you is good.
Yeah.
And
Why wouldn't you?
Trust, what people tell you.
Yeah.
I guess very naively. So I brought him on, gave him half of my company for free. And
well, I want to pause on that. So how did that negotiation go? What would, did you lead it? Did he ask for that?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
So I was excited to have somebody show an interest in my company and my little startup that had a little bit of money. He had the right credentials, and I felt like we were both on the same page at that point of, my priority was let's get this stem cell technology to the clinic or into patients.
Yeah.
So that's what I talked to him about, and he was, yes, this is my life passion, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so I took that at his word, and really this was his first CEO experience coming out of industry. And so he kind of was a little bit more about having that CEO title, and then so gave him half the company, had not, done any of the legal things you should do, which is to, vest what you're paying him or her.
He came in with cash?
No, he came in with a thing.
Okay, so he's sweat equity, so to speak.
Sweat equity, exactly.
Okay, and sorry to
no.
go back to this, but the 50% number, was there back and forth discussion on that?
Yes, so initially, obviously, he would have wanted like 60-40, and then...
Why? You're the one with all the knowledge.
Well, but he was bringing in, he felt like he was bringing in also a lot of capital, sweat equity, in that he was the business person, so he would know how to run a business. And really, primarily, I brought him in to raise money. Because he had experience as he would call it, entrepreneur. So he had raised money in the corporation that he had worked in. So he was successful at that, which is really what we needed.
Yeah.
So, as you may know, Felena, for us nowadays to bring a drug to market, the number they quote is somewhere between $1.5 to $12-15 billion and 10 to 12 years.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's that much and that long is because we have to do clinical trials, right?
Yep.
So you have to do a first clinical trial, a second, a third, a fourth. And for little startups like mine, basically you're aiming to raise enough money to get to that first clinical trial, which is a safety trial usually. And once you have that, big pharma is going to come in and take over all that investment of money and time, because it's very hard to come up with or be able to raise that amount of capital as a startup. Right?
And since you're incubating in J&J, were they showing interest in what you were doing? Were you seeing that pipeline?
So they were interested because it was an anti-inflammatory cell therapy, but J&J has very selective disease models or diseases that they want to treat or develop things for, and I was not inside one of those. So while they were really interested, loved the technology, I actually presented many times to them, but I just couldn't get the right, fit to their model of what disease they want to go after. So that was a little bit challenging because, you expect, here's a big company, they're going to...
we're neighbors.
Right.
We're
right
inside.
Here. We love what we do. Give us money. Make us, help us out of here. So I had brought in the CEO. And another problem that I should have foreseen was that he was in Maryland while I was in San Diego.
So he didn't come out.
So he did not come out. And while, you can run a virtual company and all that, really...
It makes it more difficult, especially CEO, this is the face of the business.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So there's nothing like, person-to-person communication. You can... read so much more into what's going on.
Absolutely.
With that really doesn't really kind of cross over in a phone conversation or even, all the webinar or whatever video conferencing that you can do. So that was difficult. And then, we started sort of the wheels started coming off, as you say, when we started paying money to have a branding company brand our product, even though we hadn't even developed a product.
That was his decision, I'm assuming,
Yes.
right? Of course, because he came from a big company, and that's what they do. Yeah,
Exactly.
When you have loads of money laying around, because
Yes.
that's an expensive process. It can be.
Precisely. So you basically, he was just trying to recreate what he knew, which was a big corporate model. So we were spending money on things that really are not necessary for a startup.
No.
So branding, expensive software to follow clients and contacts where we didn't have anything to sell or give away yet. So it was just, it started becoming very evident to me that we were not on the same page.
Yeah.
And so, I tried to sort of find a way to bridge that gap, but was not getting anywhere, and worse, he was kind of getting a little bit, his feathers were getting a little bit, I'm watching your peacock here.
Yes, feathers ruffled. He's probably got some ego going, I would imagine.
So
right?
he didn't like any suggestions I might have of how to run the business. And so we were actually trying to raise a Series A. So we spent money sending him to meet with investors, which is really important and really good to do, because you get a lot of exposure and get a lot of experience that way talking about your technology, and you start seeing how to tell your story in a better way and in a way that hooks people, which is all very important.
Yeah, we call it the road show, right?
The road show, exactly. But as investors were interested in looking at us and starting to put together term sheets for us, they noticed this issue there was between the CEO and me. And so that became a problem in just landing the Series A, which, we had 2 term sheets for about $20 million, which was very nice, and it would have gotten us to that first clinical trial like I would have loved to do. But they weren't, obviously they're looking at the team, which is one of the big things that investors look at, and they're seeing, well, there's a little bit of friction there, so we weren't able to land that. And so it became evident to me that either I was going to have to buy back the technology from this CEO and go back to the beginning looking for somebody else, or we were going to have to just, dissolve the company and sell the assets that we had, which was the intellectual property. So unfortunately, I couldn't get him to sell me back the technology because he was kind of hurt that I would think that I couldn't go forward with him. And so I had to actually hire a third-party firm to sell our technology, which fortunately was purchased by a company in the Bay Area where I am doing consulting for. So I kind of hope one day we will see this in the clinic. So that's continuing.
That's great.
Yeah. So
that's a huge win that you were
that
able
was a good
to.
One.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, and the assets, intellectual property assets, and a patent has some pretty good value.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Well, all this, your body of work, I mean, years and years and years.
Yeah, it's like your 15-year baby. So I had worked on that for so long. It sort of was very, very hard to have to sell it.
But good to see it go on to the next stage.
But it's not dead yet.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was a good thing.
Yeah.
I could see when I present my technology versus when a man presents my technology, people in the audience respond more to the man presenting the technology. So that was huge, interesting observation,
and
right?
I've seen it 1,000 times myself as well, and I don't know why. Like, I can't figure it out. I mean, it just doesn't. We kind of know, but it's just.
Unfortunately, we have to do a better job when we're raising kids, right? So that they know, because very early on they've done those studies where they ask 3 and 4-year-olds, like, if there's a scientist, and they all say, point to the guy.
Yep.
So we need to be better about, showing them these are amazing women scientists, and so that kids, and it's beginning to really shift. I'm really very hopeful. I have millennial children, and they're very good. I hope I was good about maybe changing that a little
Yeah,
bit. Changing that
sure.
dynamic,
I'm sure you were.
So very important, and something that I'm really bad at is going out and, number one, asking for help very early on.
Yes.
So by doing that, what you're doing is actually establishing a network. So a lot about what drove you to start your amazing programs was to have a networking, you know. It's so important that women tend to be the type of personality where we're like, we can take care of it, we can do it ourselves, you know, because we're used to problem solving by ourselves.
And sometimes I think we want to show people we can, right?
Exactly.
Which is silly.
Yeah, because we have that preconceived notion that women are not as good as, right? So you have to always be over-proving everything.
Of course, exactly.
But it's really important to early on network, ask for help. There are so many wonderful women who help other women, right? And I think the more we lift each other up, the easier it's going to get for everybody behind us. So I was really bad about asking for help, so that meant I really didn't grow my network. But now I have seen my bad ways, and so I've done things like join the Women in Bio. There, you know, there's Elevate, or, you know, there's so many great organization of women helping women, and hopefully we can get to the point where it's just people helping people and not worried about whether it's a woman or a man. But for now, do start early, getting connected to, you know, legal help, get help with business, you know, even marketing, which is huge and very important. You know, get somebody on your team who can help with those things, or get somebody in your network that can help you with all of these skills that we don't need to have, you know.
Yeah, we can't be all things.
Exactly. We don't need to have every skill.
Yeah.
So it's important, and I think, you know, men are better about that. Men are better about delegating and having others do their work for them. And I think as women we need to learn that skill.
Yeah, great.
To get there.
Yep, great advice. Absolutely.
But in the meantime, I started another company. So hopefully I will proceed in a more smart way with this new company. So bootstrapping it at the moment, but I'm starting. I decided I'm just going to do all of the preliminary proof of concept studies on my own, and then go start talking to investors and growing the team. You know, that's the hard part, is growing a team.
Absolutely. Same area or different area?
So trying to develop sort of an unconventional concept, but one of the problems with stem cells is they need to be injected at a hospital, and they're very expensive. So that means that by nature, you have to either have access to a hospital or have a lot of money to spend on these stem cell therapies.
Sure.
And so I reason that if I can put cells in a pill, I could send cells anywhere in the world, and hopefully it'd be cheaper and easier for people to have access. So the new company is all about this crazy notion of maybe giving people therapeutic cells orally. And so I filed new patent technology on that, and then so going through the whole, you know, going back and starting again, since it is a fun ride to do your startup. And
just that energy. I know. I'm it's coming up with new ideas all the time, right?
That's the fun part of it, right? You get to do something that you're passionate about, hopefully, and definitely something that I feel would help out.
Absolutely.
In bringing these cell therapies to everybody. So that's where I am.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure to come out here and see your wonderful digs here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.